Walk the Talk America presents Guns and Mental Health, a podcast for firearms owners, clinicians, and the curious public.
Welcome back, listening audience. It's 2 days in a row. Didn't get us for a couple weeks, and now you're just getting a lot of us. I am joined today with my co-host, Kevin Berry. Kevin, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. Getting back in the swinging thing, getting the live set up. No technical difficulties. We're doing good. Look at us.
Yeah, all it took was some time off. Kerri, what you don't know is we usually have, it never fails, but we always have some sort of like clunky intro or something goes wrong or the live kicks us off. So
I mean, I did think it was really brave to just put that out there that you weren't having any technical difficulties. So I'm going to knock on wood for you. And
Thank
hope
you.
that all
Thank you.
goes well, because I was like, whew, I am clearly more superstitious than Kevin.
Well, I'm excited for today's show, and the reason why, for anybody who's tuned in right now, people will tune in as we keep going. But this is you're a first. This is a first. We have never had a researcher on the show.
It's not just my first time; it's the first of my kind.
Yes.
Oh, okay, that is exciting.
Yeah, it's. I mean, that's the thing too, and you know, we talk about the research community, we talk about the firearms community, and I highly doubt like there's ever been a lot of discussions like that. I think that, like I said, this is the first, so I'm very excited. But why don't you tell us who you are and where you come from, and then we'll talk about a little bit of the history of how we met and where we saw each other first. But you know, who are you?
Cool. And if I go on too long, just give me the timeout sign, and I'll
Oh, that's not going to happen here today.
Like a researcher, I can wrap it up, or I can go long. So it's really, really lovely to be back. To be here and be back with you. You'll talk about how we met, but it's really lovely to see both you and Kevin again. So, I'm a farm girl from Texas. I grew up in Texas. I grew up on a cattle farm between, Houston and Dallas, and a little town called Madisonville. And, the most excitement in Madisonville was when we got a Buc-ee's. And if you don't know Texas, and if you don't know Buc-ee's, like you should make a road trip. And so, then after that, I moved to Nashville, Tennessee. I went to Vanderbilt, and after graduating from college, I started work at the Davidson County, which is Nashville, District Attorney's Office. And I worked as a victim advocate with victims of domestic violence and intimate partner violence. So family and romantic relationships. The definition in Tennessee by statute is just kind of large. And learned a lot, right? I was 22 and thought I knew a lot about the world and the criminal justice system and how people made choices. And I learned really fast that I did not know nearly as much, but I think I learned a lot on that job. Still keep in touch with a lot of those people today. And then I managed a domestic violence shelter in Nashville, the YWCA of Middle Tennessee. It's one of the largest domestic violence shelters in the country, where I saw a whole different kind of way that people are affected by domestic violence. The way that people intersect with the criminal justice system is one way that you see in the prosecutor's office, and the way people don't is another way that you sort of see that in a shelter context. There's some overlap, but there's also a lot of differentiation. And then I will spare you the details, but my husband and I moved to upstate New York, big shift from a girl from, a cattle farm in the South heading up to upstate New York, Ithaca to be exact. And I, long story short, went to grad school and decided to become a researcher. It wasn't planned. It wasn't a thing I was going to do. But a lot of my work and my dissertation was really motivated by my time in the district attorney's office and my time in shelter, really wanting to understand what policies and prevention tactics could work to actually decrease women and kids. Men are also victims of domestic violence, just far less. So but think about that broadly and think about how we reduce domestic violence. Because I think as an advocate, there was a lot that we did that we thought worked, right? That we believed in our guts was like the right thing to do. But none of it was supported by research or evidence. And it was all anecdotal. And, like the thing about, when you're working in the trenches, you see the people you see, but you don't see all the other people. And you don't know who policy and practices are working for, like on average, on a global scale, or in this case, county or state or national. Pick your added up scale. But like, I really wanted to go learn that and figure out like how we reduce domestic violence. It turns out a good amount of domestic violence, especially domestic violence homicide, is perpetrated by firearms. And firearms increase the risk that an incident within a home can become deadly. Women that suffer from domestic violence are also at an increased risk of dying by suicide. And so that's kind of how I came into the firearm world. Like, it wasn't like I was like, I want to research firearm injury and how we reduce firearm injury. That's certainly like where I am now. But I came at it from a very different perspective, and as someone who understands what it's like to work on the front lines and just want to know what works, right? I don't care where the idea comes from. I don't care who started it. I don't care how we figured it out. I do care that we are doing the things that reduce injury, reduce trauma, help kids be kids, and save lives. And so that's, then I graduated from grad school, went to the University of Connecticut, where I was for about 12 years. I started in 2013, and I just moved in August over to the Yale School of Public Health, working with their firearm injury prevention initiative. It's quite a mouthful, but working with that team to sort of expand our work, expand our reach, meet folks like you, Mike and Kevin, and really see how we can create some answers together. What my experience has taught me is we create answers together, and we don't do a lot in our own separate corners. So that's me.
Right. So, and now you're senior research scientist. Like that is the official title.
I'm a senior research scientist, SRS. It's the same forwards as it is backwards with the letters. That's my title at the Yale School of Public Health, and I'm super, super lucky to be here.
No, that's awesome. And I know you work and you're friends with Megan Rainey, who's a friend of Walk the Talk America. So
yep. I just texted her before I came on, in fact. So yeah.
Yeah. See, and that's the thing. I think because for so long, the firearms community in the industry has always looked at research as this negative thing that's going to be used against us. And I sort of feel like there's a lot of researchers out there that, I guess the best way to put it is, don't know what they don't know. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And for years, because of that divide, because of the whole narrative, we haven't really worked together on things. And it's kind of actually like the first time I think we may have met briefly is when I was invited by the research community to come speak and be on a panel at the firearms harm reduction conference that was in Seattle.
Right.
Right. So like, that's the first time we kind of crossed paths. But I got to know you a little bit better recently when we both were speaking at Rutgers, right? Yeah, which was really cool, quite a cool experience. We sat together at a table by ourselves, And
I know I was going to sit by myself, and I was like, Mike, don't make me sit by myself. You look very friendly. I actually didn't even remember who you were, that we had met in Seattle. Once you told me, I was like, oh yeah, we met in Seattle. But I was like, come join me at my table. And you did.
Yeah. No, and it was really cool because you're exactly the type of researcher I think that the firearms industry needs to be exposed to. And not from the sense of like, you're not going to call balls and strikes or see things the way that maybe you see them, but it's like, I do truly believe you're fair, and you're curious. When you look at this issue of firearms in the United States, and obviously with your history, I can understand why you'd want to be curious and find out what works, and also maybe have some opinions on it already, because like you said, you were in the trenches, right?
Yep.
So it's easy to have an opinion on firearms when you're in it and you see all the destruction they do. It's just like the opposite for me, right? I see all the good they do, and I'm in that all day long, right? But so I can always appreciate kind of both opinions on it. But let's just touch on the domestic violence piece real quick, because it is kind of an interesting uh, intersection, right? Like there's a lot of people that would say a firearm's more likely to create that problem when it comes to a domestic dispute, or obviously we all know the suicide issue. That's what Walk the Talk America is really built around. But then there's a lot of people in the firearms industry, and maybe some people that are listening right now that say, like, well, if you do feel like you're in danger and you're abused, get a firearm, right? Like that's the great equalizer. That's the safety net that'll make you feel safe. So it's like, how do you balance that? And I mean, you grew up in Texas, so something tells me you grew up around firearms.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer this in a couple of parts, and like if I, end up waffling, like let me know what you want me to come back to. But I did grow up in Texas. I grew up around firearms. There was a, rifle at the back door. I grew up shooting my papa's 270, which kicks like a mule. We had a revolver, and my grandparents' version of secure storage was to not put a bullet in the first chamber. So like you got a do-over, right? Like that was what I grew up in. Grew up around firearms, comfortable around firearms, see the good that they do, to use your words, right? Like grew up in a hunting family at the time in my childhood. The main reason people owned firearms in the country was for hunting. It's shifted now to self-defense, but that wasn't the leading cause, in the 70s and the 80s. So really grew up around a hunting family. I never went deer hunting. I'm going to be honest, like Bambi really got me. But like definitely got up early to see my dad and brothers off. And what was this? Was a hand up? Did you go? Can you hear me?
Oh, no, that wasn't to stop you. I feel the exact same way. I've never hunted an animal in my life.
So I've never hunted, but like definitely got up to see my dad and brothers off to go hunting, and came back and, I do like venison. And my mom always had a pistol under her seat when she drove anywhere. My brother is a truck driver, and I haven't had this conversation directly with him, but I'm pretty sure he carries a sidearm everywhere he goes, and that it's handy for self-defense. So like I see all of that. And not only have I worked with survivors of domestic violence, I am a survivor of domestic violence. So I have a family member. It's not an intimate partner relationship. It's a family member, has a lot of mental health issues, and has kind of decided that I'm the reason for all of his troubles, and has a firearm. And he lives in Texas, and has, I fully believe that if he ever saw me, he would kill me. And he was a former Marine. He went to military school. He was a Golden Gloves boxer. Firearm or no firearm, like I have no doubt that he could pull off that plan. And so what I also know is true is that when I've worked with Texas law enforcement, some Texas law enforcement have been really great at enforcing the laws in Texas designed to protect domestic violence survivors, in that enforcing orders of protection, ensuring that folks convicted of domestic violence, and he is convicted of domestic violence, don't have firearms. Some law enforcement are really great, but I've definitely had trouble with some law enforcement enforcing those laws. And so knowing what I know, on certain trips to my home state, depending on where I am, I've carried a firearm. It's legal to do in Texas, and I've done that. What I also know, and so I get it. Like when people say I want to carry a firearm and they're domestic violence survivors or living in the thick of that, I get it. But I also really, really hate it. For me, I wish I didn't have to carry a firearm to feel safe. Like, I think it should be a choice if you want to carry a firearm. I think there should be I think the evidence shows us that like permitless carry has some unintended consequences, and we need to do more on firearm safety and permitting and things like that. We can talk about that if you want. I think that's
Sure.
like important part of the research that we know. But I wish that instead of me having to carry a firearm, law enforcement would do a better job of enforcing the laws that we have on the books so that I don't have to feel unsafe. Right? I guess what I sometimes really dislike about our firearms discourse is when people say the main reason people carry a firearm is for self-defense. And I guess my question is that a world we want to live in? Or do we want to live in a world where we just feel safe and we can, better enforce our laws, better figure out who can and who should not have a firearm on their person at any given time? And I guess like that's a conversation I feel like we need to have more. I don't know the answers. I want to be really clear. Like, I'm not saying I know the answers. I have my own beliefs, but that doesn't make them the answers. But I wish we could have that dialogue more honestly and openly, as opposed to saying the main reason people carry a firearm is for self-defense and they should be able to do that. I think that's
Right.
like, that doesn't feel like a satisfying conversation or argument to me. And I wish we could be more open about whether or not that's the society we want to live in, that we want our kids to live in, that we want our parents to live in. Because also, even law enforcement officers that are trained to carry firearms aren't always accurate with firearms. And so I sort of assume, and maybe this is a bad assumption, but I assume that law enforcement officers, probably have more training than the general public. Surely there is one of your one of your listeners that like is probably
Maybe.
more trained than most law enforcement officers.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not saying that it doesn't happen. I'm just talking on averages. That's what researchers do. We tend to talk on averages. So surely there is an exception to that rule, Mike, and others. But like, I don't think I am. I don't think I am above average. And I think a question for us is like, just because I can carry a firearm, are we better off as a society with me doing it? Or are we better off thinking about this domestic abuser that's out there that has a gun illegally and is threatening this person? We should probably do more to ensure that he's not a threat to all of us. Because the other thing about domestic violence is not only is he a threat to me, I guarantee you he's a threat to the public at large, right?
100%. 100%. And just I want to circle back to that in 1 second, but I just want to tell you a funny story about.
Oh, we could use some levity. Let's go.
Yeah, my friend who's a cop in Boston, been a cop forever. This is like one day we're driving, and I said, Matt, how often do you train with your firearm? And he goes, what are you talking about? I go, how often do you train with it? Like, how many courses do you take? And he goes, I train with it once a year when I qualify. I go, really? He goes, yeah, man, I got to pay for all that stuff myself. He goes, I got 2 kids in college. I go, yeah. And I thought about it, and I was like, man, we have like bestowed upon a lot of first responders and military people that they're like these trained professionals with firearms. And literally I can introduce you to the old lady accountant down the street that's taken more actual training courses than the average person. So it's really funny how people, I was making a joke this weekend. I was at MCON, which is a military conference, and I was talking to the guys at GOA, and I was like, it's kind of like when someone tells you like, oh, I know a thing or two about firearms, or I know a lot about firearms. Like, I'm the expert here because I was in the military, or I'm an NRA instructor. And you kind of look at them and you're like, okay, you know what I mean? And it's like, and that becomes like the bigger question. And I don't want to go down this rabbit hole yet, right? We can go there, but I just think it's funny, it's just like, you're like, yeah, the police officers, they're not always accurate. Well, there's a reason why.
Well, they're not. And, even if they did train, it's a super hard job. And like, hats off to all the people that do all the things to keep us safe. And like, I am, totally indebted, but I also know that they're people. And I guess my other like larger point is like, so, at least Matt does go once a year but it's not required in a lot of states for firearm owners to do that. And, maybe that's a conversation that we want to have. I do hope that those conversations that we have, though, can be research informed. Like, I think, as I've come to this work, what I have sort of figured out is that people are really, really good at taking their experiences and therefore saying, like, because it's my experience, or even all my friends on Facebook who like are a lot like you, because they're still on Facebook and they're still your friends, if that even applies. Right? We're in these echo chambers and we assume that our experience is the experience of everybody. And it's just not. And so, as a scholar of public policy and as someone who tries to figure out, are policies effective on average? And then from there, like, do they work better for some people or do they not work better for some people? Like, I believe strongly, and this was another part of our conversation, that we should figure out if policies have unintended consequences. And if they do, we should identify them, identify where they are, and figure out if there's like a policy solution or a way to adapt policy to better deal so that we get the outcomes that we want for everybody, not just on average, but that we also take care of those unintended consequences. Because if we don't do that, we're not safe, right? Like, or at least some people aren't. And my goal in general is, not to take anybody's guns or to give everybody guns, like, or like whatever spectrum that is. I don't like, that's not my job or my goal. My goal is to figure out how we reduce firearm related injuries.
Yeah, negative outcomes, sure.
Yeah,
That's
we
fair.
can do that in a lot of ways, and I think that's your goal too. And of all the firearm owners I've ever talked to, and I've talked to a lot because, like I said, I'm from Texas. I lived like half of my life in the South, and there are also firearm owners in New York and Connecticut. Like, P.S., they do exist. And so, of all the ones I've talked to, no one ever says like, "Yeah, I want more firearm injury." Like, I think we can agree, we all want less firearm injury. We may disagree on how to get there. And my hope is that research and evidence can like resolve the disagreement, can help us put it aside our own opinions and have some firmer, more scientific, less biased, my bias, your bias, everybody's biased answers about how we get there. That's my goal.
Yeah, and for the listeners, when we were together in New Jersey at Rutgers, I want the listeners to understand, like, you were one of the researchers that was like standing up, like, for me after I spoke and said, like, yeah, we need to listen to Mike. I think we need to we need to get out of our own research bubble that we're stuck in and kind of like look at these different programs that like he has and what he's saying. And I appreciate you for that. And I believe it, right? Like I felt that. And it was nice because like when I came back, I was like talking to Kevin about it. I was like, it was nice to have like some researcher, because a lot of researchers won't say anything, or they'll just like throw questions at me, and then you never know, where they're at. But you were literally standing up saying, yeah, this is cool. So, I know you get that. Now I want to kind of go back to what you were talking about. Is this the world we want to live in?
Yeah.
I don't want to sound negative, but
you're about to. All right.
Well, no, I like to put it this way. Like, I don't think the genie's going back in the bottle, right? And I know how many guns are out there. I believe the number's a lot larger than what's stated, and I'll tell you why. Because I know how many guns my company used to do, and we didn't have any military and law enforcement contracts, at Eagle Imports, and we had specific brands that we can only sell. So I think about all the other brands. But I guess my thing is can you get to a society? I mean, I don't even know if I'd want to give up my guns if you waved a magic wand and said like, there are no guns here anymore.
Sure.
I guess it's like what's the threshold of death? Like, like you said, the guy that you've had issues with in your family seems like an aggressive guy, seems like somebody that can handle himself and could easily kill you with his hands or his car. He could just run you over, right? And this is where I don't want to sound negative, like, oh, there's nothing we can do, because there's absolutely things that we can do to reduce. But I guess that's the bigger question, right? Like, and there's no way you can answer that.
I get this question a lot. There are no easy answers, but I do have a response. How about that? I won't say I have an answer, but I have a response. So I want to take a couple of things. One, when we say put the genie back in the bottle, I'm not arguing that like we need to put all the guns back in the bottle, right? We have reduced motor vehicle deaths in this country by a lot. And I think we've probably increased the number of cars that we have. Like my family has more cars now than when I was growing up, right? Like, so I think we probably have more cars. I don't know that for a fact, but we have a lot of cars, and no one, reduced motor vehicle deaths by getting rid of cars. That was never the conversation. We reduced drowning deaths. No one did that by getting rid of pools, lakes, rivers, or oceans, right? And so when we talk about firearm injury prevention, it may mean, restricting gun access from people who, as a public and society, we think don't need to have them. Some of your listeners may think there is no reason that anybody should never have a firearm. I respect that opinion. I think that's probably not going to be our law, though, in the country. And hopefully we're all a bunch of law-abiding citizens at the end of the day. But we should have a public conversation on what that looks like. But most Americans do actually agree that certain people that are a danger to themselves or others should not have firearms. A point of disagreement is like, for how long should they not have firearms? So we can come back to that. But we do have some agreement on that. And then if we look at the, firearm injury and a death rate, let's just go with the death rate in the United States, it's far greater than any other developed country. And you've heard that stat, right? That. There are roughly 46,000 firearm deaths, in 2023. That's up, all that. What I also want your listeners to know, though, is even within the United States, there's a huge amount of variation, right? So Massachusetts actually has firearm injury death rates that approach Europe. Mississippi and Wyoming, that is not true, right? And we all have the same constitution. We have different state laws for sure, but we all have the same constitution. We all live in the same gun market. We all still have this basic Second Amendment right. And yet, even within our states, our United States, there's a huge amount of variation in what our firearm injury and death rates look like. And so I think we can actually spend some time learning from ourselves, right? I don't think the answer is necessarily to look to Europe to learn things, although there are some European countries that do have high firearm ownership rates. Finland, for example, that don't have the same kind of gun problems that we do. So I think there's a lot we can look at there and figure out what can work. That's a conversation for the public to have about what kind of laws they want. I'm a big fan of democracy, right? So that's a conversation. The other thing, though, that I think is really important to underscore is that one of the reasons we choose to use a firearm for self-defense is because they're actually really good at killing people. Cars, our hands, knives, etc., less good, less accurate. They have lower fatality rates. But a firearm, when you are hit with a bullet from a firearm, your chance of dying is higher, right? When a person, relevant to your show, Walk the Talk America, when a person chooses a firearm as their means of suicide, their case fatality rate is upwards of 90%. It is the most lethal form of sort of method that a person can choose.
This is the way I put that, because I don't believe it's the most lethal. I think the most lethal is standing in front of a train, but I think it's the most effective where convenient.
Yeah, I think that's a great way. Thank you for that reframe. And some people may, yes, there are certainly other lethal ways. I mean, that we commonly see in the ER and that are common. So yes, I totally appreciate your reframe, and I will work on adopting that language. I think
you could steal that from me.
I will.
Where convenience meets effectiveness.
Yeah, I'm also gonna So, but when we say this person would just sort of pick another way if it weren't a firearm. That's just not true. Because when they do, they often live, right? So for example, women actually attempt suicide far more than men do, but they choose far less effective means of that. Means where there can be intervention, overdose, for example, they may be found in time and they can go to the ER, and there's a form of intervention that can be effective in saving their lives. Thank goodness, right? And so they live though, and then we can get them treatment and we can get them intervention. If a person chooses a firearm, that's just a whole lot less likely. And the final point, and I see your hand, I see Kevin has his hand. The final point I'll sort of say on this is, as part of my dissertation, I wrote a paper that evaluated the Gun Control Act of 1996, which is the provision that says if you've been convicted of a domestic violence misdemeanor, you can no longer have a firearm. There's a ton of loopholes with that law, but even with that, we saw a 17% reduction in female intimate partners dying from firearms. Okay, so fewer dead wives, fewer dead ex-wives. We didn't see the same happening with men. We saw no increase in non-gun homicides. So there was not a substitution effect, right? If an abuser didn't have access to a firearm, they did not carry off a homicide with a non-firearm. I don't know if there was an assault, if there was an attempt. That I don't know. That's not in the data. What I can tell you is we saw a decline in firearm deaths and no corresponding increase in non-firearm deaths. Other papers have found the same thing when we restrict firearm access. And so I think this is just really important to keep in mind. The whole reason that we prefer guns is because they're good at what they do. And another thing may not be as easily substitutable into that equation. And that's why people prefer firearms. That's why I carry one when I go to Texas and I feel unsafe, because it's good at what it does. It's better than anything else. And part of that is it has a higher lethality than other things. Right. Okay. So I appreciate you letting me waffle. Kevin, I see your hand. Mike, I don't know if you have a thing you're going to jump in on, but that's just what
I will, but we'll let Kevin go. Kevin's
Kev,
Kevin's a quiet guy, but then when he goes, he goes.
So when
it's
he's
like
got
Jay
his
and
hand
Silent
up,
Bob.
here we go. All right.
I think majority, maybe not majority, but a lot of gun owners would feel that someone that shouldn't have firearms would be great to keep firearms out of that individual's hands. But they might harm themselves, harm others, but there's a lot of gray area in that space of who decides to draw that line. How is it enforced? How does someone get their firearms back if something is set in place to where that seems like a topic there's a lot of debate and maybe not an easy opportunity to get to improvement right away, but there does seem to be an opportunity to improve maybe the perspectives of research. I know in other conversations with you, you have a lot of good ideas of different ways to do that, but it seems like the research of nuanced solutions or other things could catch up, and in a couple of years give a lot more maybe well-rounded insights to this issue, where maybe traditionally some gun owners feel like it's researchers that have an agenda or it's only negative statistics. So do you feel the same way, or am I a little off there?
No, so I think we have got to come up with a lot of non-government options for people to securely store their firearms if they recognize that they are in a period of distress, or if others are in a period of distress, right, to get them off their property. So I have a huge amount of respect for things like the Armory Project, right? There are other states that have, you can look on a map and find a place where you could take your firearms. Some are law enforcement based, some are gun range based, some are just like other FFLs, right? Like, and you don't have to sort of involve law enforcement at all, right? So I think you're alluding to our conversations about extreme risk protective orders, or ERPOs, I'm happy to go down that. But I think like that is also like the tip of the iceberg. And my goodness, is that like a invasive thing? And maybe not everybody needs that invasive of a thing. And maybe we just need a lot of options before we get there. And, I think ERPOs, this is a point where Mike and I, and maybe you, Kevin, I don't know, you can tell us, have some disagreement. Like, I actually think ERPOs are a promising tool. I think we need to do some things to fix them around the edges. I think we have a good amount of research, some is my own, that people are really concerned, both gun owners and non-gun owners, about constitutional rights and how those policies may infringe on those. So we really need to like think about, are we doing this in a good way that is like cohesive with all of our values? I think many states do a good job. So I want to put that out there, but like, I think we need to like hear the concerns of firearm owners, because at the end of the day, in order for an ERPO, red flag law, whatever you want to call them, to sort of be initiated, someone has to feel comfortable enough in that process to initiate it. And it could be a family member, it could be a family member going to law enforcement. But if people don't feel like the process is going to protect their loved one, protect their rights, like not backfire in this right kind of icky way, like they're just not going to use it. And so we want to think about ways to make this policy helpful and minimize its harms. And that's what I meant about like, we got to figure out the unintended consequences of policies so that we can like appropriately address them. Even if it's messaging, maybe policies do address them and we just need to get the messaging out better or be really clear about what that looks like. And Kevin, like also to your point, like I also think it's really important that people think about like, you don't just have to, like maybe you want to secure your firearm, not in a point of distress. Maybe it's like your routine practice where a firearm not in use is stored. And I know you guys have a lot of expertise in that. That can prevent a whole lot of harm as well, including, a bad decision in an acute period of stress. And so like, I think we just need to like expand the conversation in a lot of ways so that it feels more like practice as opposed to like a thing I do when I'm in trouble. That just feels like, I guess like I don't want to put my seatbelt on in the middle of a crash. Like I want to put it on as I'm backing out or before I even back out of my garage. So I'm ready for whatever happens on the road.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the survey, I know we've talked about the sampling size and there's improvements of our most recent survey, but it seems like there's some middle ground of a little over 1,100 people said that they would believe in a version of law restricting access to people that shouldn't have them, adding certain protections. And I think that's probably where Mike and I agree. There might be some opportunity where red flag laws, they almost need a rebranding or the research to see all the unintended consequences of. There seems to be a lot of research on the positive, but the underlying, where we've had multiple surveys now that said over 50% of respondents of thousands of gun owners say, nope, I'm not getting any mental health help because of an ERPO. And that's flying all under the radar of those negative outcomes that we have no idea to. That's where I was kind of going with the question. I think there could be something, but it's the who's enforcing it, what's the process. It's very muddied, and I guess my lack of confidence in the sides coming together to get some legislation that does that effectively, that makes the majority of people happy, is less confident than kind of your ideas with like insurance was one of the other things alluding to, of finding ways for insurance to incentivize people for storing responsibly and different things. I think those are a lot easier and middle ground wins that could maybe be focused on instead of some, I don't know, mythical dragon legislation that everybody feels happy and the unintended consequences aren't there because it's unknown at this point.
Yeah, I did look at a survey. So I have no problem with your sample size, just to be really clear. Sample size, check. My concern about the sample is that it might not be representative of all gun owners, right? That's actually the concern. It's It's like who, not the how many, just to like be really clear. So super happy again to like partner with you guys, because I am curious, as Mike said, like I want to figure this out. And if this is preventing people from getting mental health treatment or assistance or access, like that's not the purpose of the policy. Policies have unintended consequences all the time. We just need to figure out like how to work. We have to identify them and then figure out solutions together, right? 100%. I do think, extreme risk protection order is the first word, extreme, right? So something has really gone off the rails and we are implementing this law in this extreme circumstance. And, I've talked to people who think that they have averted mass shootings. Would the mass shooting have actually happened? No one has a crystal ball, but they've taken guns and done things because someone saw something, spoke up, and a state had a lever to sort of take guns and intervene. And that person definitely wasn't getting mental health treatment. And so something was broken, right? And we have to like figure out how we come together. Because again, I think nobody wants gun injuries. I think we can all agree and think and that's where I think we should work from. Nobody wants gun injuries. How do we get there? I do again think there should just be a lot of other options for people and a lot of other incentives and nudges to move us to secure storage. And you're right, that's where the insurance paper started. It's part of my conversation with Mike. Happy to talk about that. But I know Mike has been like itching to get in. So before I launch down another rabbit hole, I'm going to give Mike the opportunity to pop in.
One second, Mike. We have a question in the chat. There.
Yeah, I was going to say, address that question in the chat.
Tovis asked, Kerri, is there a state that you feel has a well-written or better ERPO than others?
So rather than answer that, because no, I don't, but I think creates a good ERPO policy is a policy that puts a clear sort of definition on what it means to restrict a firearm, that there is an immediate risk to the firearm or self or others, that it goes before a judge or a neutral party to hear, right, where the firearm owner has an opportunity to respond. And then there is a clear way and time period where the firearm owner would get their firearms back. In speaking with firearm owners, what I don't see in a lot of those laws, and if a state has this, and I'm saying I've never seen it, I'm super, super sorry. Please be in touch and let me know you have this. What I've not seen in some of those ERPO laws is the way that the firearm will be stored while it is in the government's care. And I think this is really important, at least for the firearm owners that I've talked to. Firearms, I know who's listening for the most part, but in case I have a non-firearm owner like listening, firearms are really expensive. Firearms are often something people care a lot about, and they put a lot of love and care into their firearms. It may be something that they've put together. It may be something that is a family heirloom, but it is like an important object to them. And just like if someone took my wedding ring, I would want to know how they take care of that when it's not with me. And I don't think a lot of ERPO laws talk about how the firearm will be cared for, where it will be. I think a lot of people sort of like have images of it getting like stuffed in a locker, and they're worried that they're not going to get their firearm back in the condition in which it was taken. And so I think like those kinds of things need to be incorporated, at least based on the firearm owners I've talked to. I'd be really interested if you're hearing the same thing. And then the other thing I think is important in these laws is like most states take firearms for a year after the hearing with the judge. They go into custody for a year. But I think there needs to be like a clear process. And as someone who has worked in the criminal justice system, I'm going to say clear and easy, because most are not both of those things, but a clear and easy process by which you could demonstrate that you are now able to take back your firearms in a safe manner, both safe to yourself and safe to others. I don't see those elements in a lot of ERPO laws, and I think it would really behoove us to think about how we incorporate them.
Yeah, I agree. I always say, like, if you can't have your guns, you shouldn't have your car. I mean, honestly, I'm more on the lines of if you need to be red flagged, you need to be taking off the street. That's just my opinion, right? Like because I've had people in my life that have taken their life and they didn't own a firearm, and they could have
Mhm.
probably used an ERPO at that moment, right? So and Tovis is bringing up some great questions, right? And this is why this is going to be a fascinating conversation. It's like I wish it was the Joe Rogan 3-hour podcast, but I wanted to ask you a quick question, and I could be wrong about this, so I don't want to, I'm not to the listeners. I'm not saying this is matter of fact. I could say it matter of factly if I was intellectually dishonest, but from what I understand and what I've heard, in every state that has an ERPO, the total number of suicides has gone up. Maybe the gun suicide has gone down. And back to your original point, and we all agree time and space, we're all on the same page there, though. Is that what you found true? And if so, then what are we doing? Like, what is the goal? Like, are we celebrating that we got firearm suicide to go down, but overall suicide went up? Because I would fire somebody that celebrated that. Like, I'd be like, you're fired. So, what are your thoughts on that, Kerri? And you may not have the answer now. This may be one of those I got to circle back type things. But
Yeah,
what
so
are
I'm
your thoughts?
certainly going to circle back. I haven't heard that, but I will circle back.
Okay.
I agree with you. So I started this by saying I want to reduce firearm injury. Really, I want to reduce injury and death. And so you're exactly right. Like, and this is why in my paper I looked like, does firearm deaths go down, but a different death like go up? Because like the language I use in my paper is that would frustrate the intent of the policy. Like, no, we want less dead, injured, and traumatized people, right? Like firearms just tend to be like the most common way that some of these are being achieved among certain groups, right? Not among all groups, but among certain groups. And so 100% agree with that. I will absolutely circle back. I haven't heard that. And I'm just going to like hold on saying like my immediate inclination, because I want to, be true to the researcher side of what of my hat here.
Well, and that's why I preference that way. That's why, you know what I mean? Because I could be wrong too.
I could be wrong too. That's honestly the fun thing about my job. Like people are like, oh my gosh, how can you study firearms? Firearms, domestic violence, and child maltreatment. Those are my areas of study. Like they're pretty depressing. And if you go to a like cocktail hour or something, but what I do like about it, one, is the idea that I think we can find ways to make progress at this overall goal, and that's super satisfying. The other thing is, as you kind of pointed out, like it's like an intellectually curious way to like live your life. Like, okay, this happens, then this happens, then this happens, because people respond to incentives and people respond. Like humans are really hard to figure out. It's why we have unintended consequences of policies, right? And that I find like intellectually fascinating. I wish humans were easier to like figure out. Like I do a policy, you're going to do a thing, and like Bob's your uncle, we're all done here. That's seldom the case, but I will circle back promptly.
Okay, yeah, because it just, like I said, it just seems like we shouldn't be celebrating. And Walk the Talk America is always going to do their best to reduce all negative outcomes of firearms. So to me, like, someone could turn around and say, well, why are you celebrating his guns good? I'm like, that's what I specialize in, right? Like, and that might be the answer. Kevin, you have a comment?
I don't know if you know the answer to this, Kerri, but why are so many universities now, maybe I'm wrong, but it's seeming like more and more universities are creating these firearm research, whatever groups, that when we first started that in 2020, I don't think there were so many. Now it's ASU, Wyoming, like all of them seem to have this branch of research. Is this new? Am I right? And what was the kind of motivation? What prompted that?
Yeah, so I think I know the answer. And that is prior to 2020, there was actually a federal moratorium on federal research for firearm injury. Congress actually passed a law that said no federal dollars could go towards the research of firearm injury prevention. And so for a long time, there just was not federal support or federal dollars to do this work. And research costs money. And right, like I don't make a lot. I want to be clear, like I'm not in this for the money, but it does in fact cost money to do. And so actually in 2020 was the first year that the CDC opened grants and the federal government opened. They allowed about $25 million, I think, in year one, and then in 25 in year two. The number is 50 million. I could have my numbers of years that they split this like incorrect, but for the first time in 2020, federal dollars were appropriated to the study of firearm injury prevention. And when that happened, universities who had long had an interest in this were finally able to sort of actually do this interest because it could be funded. And so you have seen an increase, an uptick in firearm injury prevention work. The conference that Mike's, is a post 2020 conference for that reason. But a lot of people were doing this work before. They were just doing it broadly under sort of injury prevention, and firearms obviously play a key role in various injuries. But we were looking at injuries broadly, and I think we should look at injuries broadly because, to Mike's point, we don't want anybody to die. Like I'm not looking for to make trades here. That's, we want to bring our injury rate down and our life expectancy up, right? Like we want to live longer, fuller lives. That's really the goal here. But I think that's largely why, and other foundations also who were here before, but had sort of increased their giving to sort of leverage the fact that federal dollars were also available. And so, we'll see what happens in the current administration. I definitely don't want to make this political, but like some of that funding is a little bit in jeopardy. So my guess is you're going to see a pulling back of that research. That's my hunch. Not because we've solved the problem, it's gone away, people are interested, but as you know, you can only do what's funded.
Yeah, I also think it's that I think that you guys have been labeled anti-gunners in disguise of like researchers that are really anti-gunners, right? Like, and I think that will always ultimately work against you, especially when it comes to funding, because I just know how we are today in today's society. It's like we've made our minds up about something, and that's why I think we need to keep beating the drum of, not all research is going to be for negatives. Like, let's find some positive stuff, or let's research some negative outcomes of what we thought worked, right? And I know you get that. I'm preaching to the choir.
Would you like me to sing? Shall I burst out in song?
No, but like there's these little things that, and keep in mind, I probably have no business being where I am today. Like I'm just like a simple guy
just a
from
farm
New
girl
Jersey.
from Texas. Like we all
Right,
got where we got.
Right, but I call them like the things that make you go home. Like, remember that song, "Things That Make You Go Home"? So I was talking to this guy Chris from Everytown this weekend because his booth was across from mine and at the military conference, right? It was really, really interesting, but it's kind of fun. We were having some really good civil discourse, but he would say these certain things and then he wouldn't be able to answer them when I'd ask like a follow-up question. It's kind of weird how you can almost take one Jenga piece out with a question, and the whole thing collapses. And one of his points was like, he lives in Hawaii. And he's like, yeah. I said, how much gun violence do you have there? He's like, not much, because we don't have any, we're islands and guns are restricted and da, 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 da. And he's like, not like, Chicago, which has like restrictive gun laws, but suffers because of Indiana. And I literally asked him, I'm like, why doesn't Indiana's cities have the same gun violence as Chicago or Ohio's cities? Because they border, Indiana is Indiana, but like Ohio borders Indiana, and they don't have the violence that Chicago. Have you ever, like in your time running in the circles, has somebody ever been able to answer that? Like, why is it just Chicago that suffers because of the Indiana gun laws, but not the other states around?
So I was looking around for a book and I don't have it like handy because I was going to hold it up. So my friend and colleague who is from the Chicago Crime Lab just wrote a book. His name is Jens Ludwig. And he wrote a whole book on Chicago's gun problem and epidemic and why it exists. I think another thing, even to just drill down a little bit more, is that Chicago writ large does not have the same gun problem. Like even Chicago, even
it's like
areas
4 blocks. It's like 4 blocks of Chicago.
A little more than 4. But even areas in Chicago, because then the next thing people would say is it's poverty, Mike. Like Chicago has more poverty than that whatever state you named in Ohio, right? Like it's poverty, it's social determinants of health. And while I think all of that like has a place, you can look in Chicago and 2 places with the exact same levels of poverty have very different firearm homicide rates and injury rates, right? So even in Chicago, even like, so Jens in his book, he's like, there are 2 areas and they're like divided by a street, right? So like as literally, at least in Indiana, you got to go over the bridge and pay a toll, right? Like they is across the street, have very different firearm rates. So there are a couple of things. One, access to guns, we think matters, right? But again, across the street, same access to guns, like really a very trivial difference. From there, it really is also about the fabric of our communities. Communities that have a lot of street lights do better than communities that don't. Communities that have a lot of eyes on the street and people that can intervene really are helpful. You know, we know that in an instant, if you are carrying a firearm and you felt threatened for some reason, you have that firearm accessible to you to pull out and make a life-altering split-second decision. And I saw Ovis's question in the chat about like, can we have more training? Absolutely, Ovis, we can have more training. Nothing I am saying is like one thing and not another. I usually say there's no silver bullet, meaning like we need a myriad of solutions here, including training, but not just firearm training. So one of the things that we have found in the research community that I gotta admit, I was super, super skeptical about. I was like, there is no way. But if I'm going to like consider myself a serious researcher and someone who pays attention to the evidence, things like what we call cognitive behavioral therapy are really, really important to helping people manage those times of stress, especially if they have a firearm on their person, to make a decision that like they're going to be happy they made 5 minutes later, right? Meaning that they did not prematurely discharge their firearm and shoot their firearm when what could have been just as effective as walking away, right? Sometimes we can just walk away, right? Some folks are better able to do that. And that comes down to a whole lot of things. But in Jens's book, he talks about like system 1 and system 2, and it's basically your flight or fight response. And what we've got to help people with a lot, and CBT helps people manage their fight or flight response, to make a decision that is not split, is not in the moment, to think about like how to better handle a situation and like not just need 5 minutes of their life back to have literally not made a life-altering mistake that they are really, really upset about. Communities have different levels of those extra protections. Do I think it is about access to firearms and some people who shouldn't have firearms having them? Yeah. Do I think there are a lot of other things we can do too? Yeah. Do I think, by the way, the one thing I don't want this to be left with is that this is only a problem in our urban communities? It is not. We also see in states where they are passing permitless carry laws. A colleague of mine, Susan Parker, has found that gun injury and death has gone up specifically among white men over the age of 40. Okay, so this is not like a problem where just some people have, you know, a problem exercising restraint when they feel threatened. We all sort of might have this inclination. We all have this like response in us to do the thing to protect our person. And we all, therefore, I think, need training on like not just how to safely handle a firearm. Yeah, absolutely. If you're going to own a firearm, please do that. But we all actually need training in like, how do I take a breath and like walk away from a situation that is charged? I do this with my kids all the time. They don't have firearms, by the way, right? And so like, it's a thing that like firearm or non-firearm, we can all, do better. And when we've done CBT and randomized controlled trials, we see huge reductions, huge and lasting reductions in violent crime, criminal justice contact, etc., among the folks that got it relative to the folks who did not. And it's randomly assigned. These are really robust studies. And so to answer your question, parts of Chicago have more of those protective factors than others. And that makes a huge difference. And parts of Ohio probably have different levels of Chicago. So it's like a myriad, just like there's no silver bullet, there's no silver like push, or if that makes sense. Like I'm trying to make the opposite and it's not coming out particularly well. I've never done an analogy on the fly, but I think that would be my initial response.
So you brought up an interesting point about more people carrying, especially states that have constitutional carry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen any statistics? This is one of the things I asked the guy from every town, Chris, and he didn't have an answer for me because he was kind of going off on constitutional carry. How many people before the states had constitutional carry, and there's some states that don't have constitutional carry,
Yep.
how many people actually go get their CCW, their concealed carry license, right? Like, and actually go out and commit a crime? Do we have any numbers of that? Have you ever seen anything like that?
So, no, but what does happen, what we do know happens in states with permitless carry, or I don't want to pick on states with permitless carry, though we do see this in states with permitless carry, states that sort of have like laxer gun laws. You just see an uptake in both purchasing and ownership of guns, for sure. That puts more guns in circulation. And whether or not that gun owner is the one committing the crime, we just don't have really great data on that. Kevin, PS, back to 2020, we don't have great data on this because you really also need your data to be being taken before the permitless carry sort of movement happened. And we don't really have good pre-post data. Just take some time to do data. Data has a lag. What we do see is more guns in circulation. And what we have seen a lot of are increased gun thefts, specifically from cars. Upwards of like 67,000 guns are reported stolen from cars in this country every year. Every year, right? Now, I don't know about you, but I just don't think a person that steals a gun has any like inclination to act like a responsible gun owner with their stolen gun from a stolen car. And we see that really happening a lot in cities. We're seeing like guns being stolen more in cities and less in rural areas. The gun theft from car rate is actually pretty flat, but we're seeing increase in cities, decrease in rural areas. And so I think like the other thing that's happening is like, and we don't have the data to really tease this out. This is just like from sort of putting some papers together and looking at data on my own and just sort of chatting with people. We do know that permitless carry, when gun dealers open up in places, more guns are sold. We do know that they get more in circulation, and we know permitless carry and states that don't have a secure storage law are particularly vulnerable to gun theft. And we can trace that to an increase in crime. So if I could say one thing to your listeners, it is the most responsible thing that you could do is to secure your firearm when it is not in use. And it's particularly vulnerable parked in your car outside of your house. We're really seeing gun thefts go up in your car, parked in your driveway. And so store your gun. Right? Like you may not be, right? Like law, I hear the whole, I've gone through the training, I've done the thing, I'm a law-abiding gun owner, I'm not perpetrating crime. I'm not saying you are. I am saying I would hope that you would take steps not to be a part of the supply chain, right? Not like willingly a part of the supply chain. You've been a victim of crime if someone has stolen your firearm, and I don't want anyone to be a victim of crime. So please secure your firearm.
Just seems like a a recipe or a poor formula. There was no funding to kind of have research about a really important topic. And we seem to have inklings and we know pieces of information, but there's just so much unknown. It's almost like shark attacks. We see the very end outcome that's very violent and gets a lot of media attention, but we have no idea how many people are swimming next to a shark every day, but because nothing happened, it's not reported or we have no data on it. It seems similar with firearms, of like the average person doesn't know in some states how many people had a concealed firearm on them and nothing happened. Everything was fine, but we see these horrific actions and the end results that are a minority that get so much media attention and other attention and data, but we really don't understand the full picture and how all the variables influence and how to really get our hands around it and make some impact.
Yeah. And so
Yeah,
we'll have to be
I have a
creative.
quick comment.
Yeah.
I just wanted to address this. And actually, I want to let you loose in the comment section if you're seeing the live chat,
I
Kerri,
don't know
because
how
there's
to see them, and I'm scared if I press a button, I'll go away and end it all. So
We can bring them up after Mike addresses whatever you want to do.
there they are.
we'll-
Now
we'll-
I see them. Okay.
yeah,
I just didn't
so-
want to press the button.
So, Kerri, it just seems like I have my concealed carry license. I remember getting my first concealed carry license in Ohio, and I had to register with the state of Ohio. If I commit a crime with a firearm, that goes on file, and usually that goes right into the NICS, so now I'm a prohibited person. It seems like we could easily get that data. Am I wrong in thinking that?
So wrong. Oh, my friend. No, there are like a bunch of protections and restrictions on getting especially sort of state collected firearm data around that. And part of it is distrust of researchers. Part of it is gun owners have long not wanted to sort of be on a list, regardless of how they got there, right?
But when you
That is
commit a
public-
crime, you're on a list, correct?
but you're on the list, but they don't necessarily want it given. We can get like Nix's hits, we can get things like that, but it's really, really hard to tie those to people. California has some exceptions that have allowed researchers to sort of connect a good amount of their data. Garen Wintemute in particular has done a lot. And so we actually we have a decent understanding of how some of this works in California. And California is a very large state, has a great sample size, Kevin. But the question is then California representative to the rest of the United States, despite having a lot of people, right? To our previous, conversation about numbers versus representation. So I think it helps us learn a lot. I think we could do, we've tried to sort of do some data matching in Connecticut, and we've not been able to do it. And Connecticut is a state that has really sort of restrictive gun laws. And so even in Connecticut, it's really, really hard. But it's hard. So
No, I get you on that. I just feel like every time I see an article where somebody shoots somebody and they always identify if he's a legal gun owner or a concealed carry holder, right? Like, it just seems like we could figure out how many concealed carry holders actually, like, in their head, like, committed a violent crime after they got their license. I get what you're saying. I believe you. I believe there's the right hand doesn't necessarily always talk to the left hand in certain states. There's politics involved. There's protections. I get it.
Well, what I also want to say is, even if you're not committing that crime, you can still be a crime fighter by securing your weapon so that it doesn't get stolen by a person who would then use your gun in a crime. So don't be a part of the supply chain either.
Yes, you're saying what Walk the Talk America preaches.
I know. I just wanted to say it again.
Let's get to some of these in the comments, because I see so many good comments coming up.
Okay. I don't know where to start. Where do you want me to start? What have we already? Oh, there's a really big Okay, but they just get bigger.
I'll bring it up again. Do states
you
with
want-
more prohibited places have a higher number of thefts from vehicles because people need to store them in their car instead of bringing it in with them?
So I think the answer is probably yes. We saw this in Tennessee. A little bit, right? Like, so Tennessee, for example, passed their permitless carry law, and then we actually saw an increase in guns because there were more guns in circulation, but they couldn't necessarily bring them in. Even states with prohibited places, like there's a lot of places you can't bring them into. Like even in Texas, like so when my dad passed away in Texas, we had to leave our firearms in the car because you can't take them in the hospital, and that's Texas. They have permitless carry, so even there are just a lot of prohibited places, even, in a state that you think is very, bring your guns wherever. And states have a right to sort of declare sensitive places as well. I think we have seen that. We do see that more in urban places when people are leaving guns in their cars. What I would love to see happen is that we work with car insurance companies, and that car insurance companies give you incentives to install a secure storage device in your car. Maybe even car manufacturers just like put that in their car from the beginning. And then you have a secure storage facility in your car that you could put your gun in. That's not your glove box. Your glove box is not a secure storage place. I just want to make that really clear. Even if it has a lock, you need to do better, because if they can get in your car, they can get in your glove box. So really having a secure storage box in your car, I'd love to see you get a deduction on your car insurance with that. If there are any insurance professionals that want to test that, I would love to work with you to test it. I also think, we know roughly 67, it's a little less than 67. I'm just saying that for rounding purposes. About 67,000 guns were stolen from cars in 2023. That's reported, right? There are a lot of people that probably had their gun stolen, but did not report their gun stolen, maybe because they weren't supposed to have the gun, or maybe they were in a secure storage state and did not want to, declare that they had not properly secured their weapon, right? We can talk about unintended consequences of laws all day long. Underreporting of things is certainly one of them. We do know, however, in states that have secure storage laws, we see fewer gun thefts from cars. Sorry, I had a little brain. I wanted to get that right. So we don't know that that's causal. There correlative things happen all the time. We haven't done that in a causal way. But in states with secure storage laws, fewer guns are stolen. And so one thing we could do is just in the meanwhile, adopt that practice that seems to be protective, even if we're not in a state that requires it. One reason I really like secure storage is my magic wand. If I could do one thing to reduce firearm injury, it would be secure storage. Why? Because it's protective across so many different domains. I just think it's a thing that and you can do it with or without a law. No law requires you. Well, in some states it does, but in states like Texas, it's not required. In states like Missouri, it's not required. You can still voluntarily protect yourself.
Yeah. You're talking transfer laws for the listeners. Certain states have transfer laws. In Nevada, I fight that all the time because it's if you come over to my house and take the gun out of the house, we've just both committed a crime. I think those are the things we need to work on too. It's a lot of people don't think of that. They think Mike's only going to hand his gun to his neighbor who he likes, who's in a domestic dispute, or some sort of fight. They don't think of the whole thing. So I totally get what you're saying. Yeah. What else we got in the how are we doing on time for you? Like I said, I can have you on for 3 hours.
I have a faculty meeting around 1:30 that I should probably show up to, and it's 1:16 my time.
Okay, so we got a couple more minutes. Kevin, is there anything we'll have you back on?
Yeah,
because I think we need to advertise you a little bit and get more, because the thing is we do these pop-up podcasts and stuff like that, and just people jump in, but I think it's great for people to hear your perspective, so it kind of demystifies all researchers are out to get us. And, and also too, I think that the conversations is great. I mean, I've been looking at the chat and there's just so many great points. Is there one that stood out, Kevin? Because my eyes are bad. I have to lean into the the monitor. Exactly.
No, I didn't see one. Did you see one we wanted to highlight? I thought maybe Kerri highlighting some of the things. I know one question asked, is that paper on insurance, is that public or is that still being worked on and being released later? Or
Oh no, it's public. I
Okay.
can I'll send it to you and you can put it wherever. It's currently on the Niskanen website. I'm a senior felon at the Niskanen Center in Washington D.C. and so they have published the white paper and that's where it is. So no, it's public and
Okay.
it's out. My guess is your listeners will agree with some things and not others, but that's great.
just like we did, but at least we got the opportunity to have a open conversation back and forth and perspectives on it. But is there anything else you kind of want to highlight, Kerri, about your work with kind of nuanced, maybe research, if that's the right term, coming up in the upcoming research conference?
Yeah, so I am presenting a workshop on with a group from Yale. Megan is our moderator, Mike, on the importance of storytelling in research and sort of incorporating people's stories. Like what I think is really important to remember is that, over 45,000 people died in the United States in 2023 as a result of a bullet entering their body, however you want to frame that. But each of those folks was a person and had a story. One of my favorite homicide detectives from LA, whenever he would work a homicide crime, he would say, that's somebody's baby, right? And I think that's just really important to remember the stories. I think it's really important to hear diverse perspectives of the law is working and the law is not working. I mean, that's when I would sit with victims of domestic violence and I would say, as a result of this conviction, the abuser can no longer have a firearm, without fail, we would have multiple convictions in any given day. One victim would say, great, I feel much safer. And another victim would say, Kerri, if the abuser is going to kill me, they're going to kill me, right? And so those stories are really important to figuring out what the right research questions are. And it's why I'm so excited to be here, to interface with your audience. I can't read all the chat, but if I could get them all, I would love to go through them and read them because those are their stories and those are their questions. And we owe them research. We owe gun owners and non-gun owners research on this topic because both are at risk of firearm harm or something else, to our previous conversation about things shifting around. And we owe everybody that research, regardless of how they come to this issue. And of course, I guess the final thing I want to say, as I think about gun owners, they're not a static population. One person can be a non-gun owner today and a gun owner tomorrow. And one of the things that I would love to think about how we do is how we help them quickly become a responsible gun owner. What are the practices we can do? Is that something with your insurance policy? Is that something with the seller? Is that something with the firearm community? Is that a podcast? What is it that when someone moves from one category, right? And I hate categorizing people, but one category to the next, we work on. And I think the other thing is, one day your life can be fine. And the next day it might not be. So I shared with Mike and Kevin before I came on the podcast that my father-in-law died on Saturday, somewhat unexpectedly. And some family members have firearms. And I said, we need to call them and make sure the firearm is securely stored. Because on Friday they were fine. And now they're not. And we need to recognize that within a person, what does risk mean can change. And we need to be ready to have those conversations and to offer that support so that none of us have to experience a bad outcome. That's my goal. That's why I'm here. That's why I've appreciated learning from you today. And I hope it's been useful and helpful.
It has, Kerri, and we're going to have you back. I would love for you to come on as a regular. I think it's important because we keep bridging these gaps, and I know we're in a time crunch here. Don't hop off because I have one
Nope.
more thing I got to say to you
Okay.
after we
Not
end.
hopping.
But thank you. If people want to email you or ask you a question, maybe just a follow up to get your opinion, how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah. So my email is Kerri.Raissian@Yale.edu. So I know how to type in the chat. One thing I will warn you about is I'm slow on email. So if it takes me a minute, please don't be offended. My entire team will tell you I'm slow on email. So I'm really sorry. Sometimes it also goes to my junk email accidentally. So just depending on the filter. So if you don't get a response, I'd say in like a week, feel free to email me back. And I'm happy to engage to the extent that we want to like be constructive and have a like, useful dialogue. So very happy to answer questions. I also have a website. The Yale School of Public Health Firearm Injury Prevention Initiative page is also something we're working on building and reconstructing. Hopefully that can be a useful resource to folks. And we'd also love your feedback on what would be useful to you, because we don't want, we call it FIPI, Firearm Injury Prevention Initiative. We don't want the FIPI website to be like just the thing where researchers are talking to research. Our motto is linking science with society. And that's all of you. That's us. That's everybody. And so if that page is not doing its job, we definitely want to hear about it and know ways that we can do that with honest research.
Oh, that's awesome. And like I said, you'll be back on. She'll be back on, folks. So like, if it's not a burning question, let's not flutterbox, but we can prepare the questions ahead of time, and we'll get you a copy of that chat, Kevin. That's possible, correct? Like we can. Kevin's, you could do anything, man. You gotta understand, Kerri. Kevin is my brains. So
We can. You challenged me. I delivered. We got it.
okay, exactly. Okay, well, we want to thank the listening audience, Kerri, you especially. Thank you for coming on and actually like stepping up. And you're exactly who I knew you were going to be coming on here. And I knew we were going to have this great conversation. And I knew I have people texting me how awesome you are.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I've had that. Yeah, and people in the chat, I think, love the conversation. Look forward to doing it again. Until next time, folks. Walk the Talk America. We thank you. We love you. We want to thank all of our sponsors that make this possible. The Rugers, the Arms Corps, NASGW, like everybody that is the Lipsies, everybody that is from the firearms industry that is invested in us and saving lives. Until next time, folks, we wish you better.